Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny,
And I'm RJ.
and today we're going to talk about 7th Sea, Lands of Golden Fire. 7th Sea, Lands of Golden Fire is a source book, part of the 7th Sea second edition line, currently published by Chaosium. This is a little over 200 pages. The setting is the continent of Ifri, which is larger than Thea, and there are 5 main nations or kingdoms, which are Axum, Kemet, Maghreb, Mandam Kurufaba, and Mbe. Any apologies for mispronouncing any of that. There's a lot for players to explore in this continent. The lands of Ifri are influenced by African history and mythology, and if you love their other setting books that 7th Sea has produced, this will not let you down. The kingdoms within are fantastically described, and there are so many adventure seeds and ideas for game masters. Today, RJ and I are going to talk about the top 5 things we loved about this book.
In the 7th Sea rules, there's a way to track the corruption of a hero and to tell redemption stories when necessary. Lands of Golden Fire introduces ways to play a bit more of that in-between area, where heroes can be tempted to align with malevolent spirits. The Vile Dice rules can grant extra dice to a hero's pool, but with a chance of further corruption. The new Red Touch sorcery can remove the corruption from others to feed its power, but this type of sorcerer walks the fine line of becoming more easily corrupted themselves. And the new Melber sorcery allies the sorcerer with an evil demon, and this can easily lead to more corruption. So this book provides more ways to play with corruption that are fun for players and great for telling darker stories.
A quick example of how corruption can help with storytelling is with Mbe. Of all the settings presented, Mbe has the greatest need for heroes, but it's full of demonic influences. Heroes shouldering corruption while fighting the forces of darkness can lead to great stories. Those of you who are fans of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, whose characters also deal with corruptive spiritual forces, will favor these rules. To piggyback a bit from RJ's point, I just want to share briefly about Heka magic, also a new sorcery option in this book. Heka deals with manipulation of life energy or Ka, and with a talisman. It can give different utility effects like warmth, strength, or healing. Dark Heka exists, and exists in places like tombs. It is an easy way to attain more power, with some possible curses connected to it. And this can be another tool for game masters to tell their stories to their players.
Lands of Golden Fire throws the spotlight on high-stakes play. The continent of Ifri faces dire struggles both within itself and with outside forces such as the Atabean Trade Company and the colonial powers from Thea. The gods, demons, and spirits of Ifri are also active and present in daily life. The international Kurufaba is a great way to play the Game of Thrones, diplomacy, and intrigue in Ifri, and also have an impact across the world. The Kurufaba is basically a league of nations with representatives from Ifrian nations, and from the New World, and from Thea, and from the Crescent Empire. Each of those representatives has their own plots and motivations. And the spiritual powers of Ifri are also present and working here behind the scenes. And each nation is facing its own crises in the context of a crisis facing the entire continent, which is the reawakening of Bonsam, which is the ancient evil that's now freed from its prison by human decisions. The kingdom of Kemet is huddling under long, dark nights, lit by these eerie lights atop its pyramids, while the kingdom of Mbe is under an evil influence and unearthing the prisons of ancient demons with slave labor. The NPCs that are presented in the book are the main actors in these conflicts, and the adventure hooks are also oriented towards this high-level play.
For high-stakes play to work in games, game masters need a great deal of information about the setting, and this book does a tremendous job. RJ mentioned the antagonists and NPC information you receive in this book, but it also gives you the history of the area, the government, and important locations. You get information about the economy, class systems, views on religion, climate, and name choices. There are also 4 new secret societies, a section about the bestiary of Ifri, geography, and so forth. And speaking of distinctive settings,
Describing the setting as simply Ifri conceals the amount of variety that's in this book. Each of the 5 kingdoms evokes very different senses, ranging from jungle rivers to desert dunes to high mountain villages. And each culture is very unique and memorable in its own way. In addition to those 5 kingdoms, each of which has a few of its own subcultures, there are the river people who live on the 4 cardinal rivers of Ifri, and there's also the land of the gods, rumored to be at the origin of the rivers in a sea of mist and fire. Lesser publishers might publish each of these kingdoms as a separate supplement, but presented in context together here, it provides a great way to play each kingdom not as its own setting, but as part of the greater Ifrian crisis.
Each setting has a lot of avenues where game masters can take their players. Your adventurers can work to find out some of the greater mysteries of Ifri, like the missing gods, and whether it's tied to the rise of these demonic attacks. But you can have multiple sessions in each of these kingdoms. Kemet, for example, which the setting is heavily influenced by Egyptian mythology and history, has not only mysterious pyramids and mummies, but also has the coming darkness enveloping the whole land. Nights are getting longer and more monsters attacking from all sides. You also have a paranoid queen, a prince who may be a half god or half demon, a life manipulating sorcery, and so much more. And speaking of character options,
Lands of Golden Fire can be used with heroes from Thea or other parts of the world, or with heroes from within Ifri herself. The adventure ideas for each kingdom provide ways for both outsiders and residents to take on the conflicts. So Ifri doesn't just feel like another place to go out to and save from itself. In addition to providing 5 new nations, there are 3 new sorceries, 3 dueling styles, and a new weaponry option called Zamarine Weaponry. And it is fantastic for weapon-focused heroes. By purchasing the advantage named Zamarine, your hero gains a weapon forged from a mysterious metal, which can be tainted by corruption when not purified. That weapon gets 1 origin and 2 facets that you select from a list. And the weapon can continue to gain new bonuses by achieving legends during play, such as the Reforged legend, which you gain when your Zamarine weapon is destroyed, but its shards are recrafted into a new blade, and then you get a 3rd facet for the weapon when this happens. So this is more than a signature item. This gives a hero a weapon that continues to change and be part of the larger hero's story.
to emphasize more of RJ's point about how these options help flesh out the hero's story, let me just briefly describe more of Zamarine weaponry advantage. Personally, I love the overall origin of how the Zamarine weapons were found and its application to the game. Zamarine is a metal that is twice as strong as iron and half the weight, and carries a supernatural glow when exposed to light. Once it was made for great heroes and villains in history, but now a warlord has taken over the mines. Criminals now mine the earth for raw Zamarine, unprotected from the deadly rays, which leads to a painful, gruesome death. This one advantage gives game masters a good number of adventure seeds, from interesting NPCs that run these prisons to those in power who want these metals for their own nefarious purposes. What the game does to balance this so that this weapon is not chosen by every character, you need the Zamarine advantage to acquire it, which, as RJ pointed out, allows you to also to customize its origins, facets, and legendary properties.
So first of all, the subject of slavery is front and center in this book. Slavery is a prominent part of Ifri's story, and there's also a side discussion about the different types of slavery and how to incorporate the evils of slavery into your game responsibly. 7th C 2nd edition has always been very inclusive with respect to disabilities, gender identity, social norms, and sexual orientation. And Lands of Gold and Fire continues this. For example, there's a prince with limited leg mobility and a story of how he developed into a strong cavalry officer. And the Kingdom of Kemet uses the pronoun Zer for gender fluid presenting individuals, while the Kingdom of Mbe has traditional gender roles, but also honors the concept of gender nonconformance within those roles. Lands of Gold and Lands of Gold and Fire really makes an effort to include these traditionally ignored or underrepresented people.
One last thing to add to your point. The writing team behind this book is also diverse. For example, Jerry Grayson is one of the lead developers, and I'm a fan of his RPG work. And I recognize Chris Spivey in the writing credits. Chris Spivey also wrote one of my favorite Call of Cthulhu source books, Harlem Unbound.
So those are our top 5 finds in the Lands of Gold and Fire, and there's a lot more in this book that we haven't mentioned.
I'm really glad that a book like this exists, and that exists for 7th This book is available now in print and PDF, and I recommend that you get it if you enjoy the 7th role-playing game, and I also recommend it if you enjoy reading settings that are influenced by other cultures besides European ones. It's a fantastic, well-organized book. The art is great, and now I have to roll up some new characters. So take care, everyone. Get your shots. Have a great day.